everybody. My name is Marcus. I'm going to talk generally about like solving like non-academic problems, learning non-academic problems, and kind of like how I got to the point where I'm at. So we can start with some of these ancient times. I was an undergrad. I actually never even wanted to go to college. I just wanted to play basketball, and I went to undergrad to play basketball. Played like D2 over at Hawaii Pacific, and then UVA-Wise, just like University of Virginia's other campus that no one knows about. It's kind of like U of M Dearborn or something, or U of M Flint, right? But during undergrad, like I was always like really drawn to like computers and like machine learning. This like the ancient days of like machine learning and AI back in like 2014, 2015. Hence why I say ancient, where like the state of the art was like ImageNet and like, ooh, how many classes of images can I solve in under 10 seconds, right? This is back when like the Netflix had like the $1 million challenge and those kinds of challenges, like right around the time that like Waymo started getting like picked up in things. So this was like a kind of nice entry point for me because one, everyone was kind of new. So like, it's not like you're dealing with someone who's been working in this for like 20 years or something. Like everyone sucks. So level playing field. The other thing was that if you were someone who likes to experiment, likes to tinker, there's tons of like open source available software that you could use to build cool things. And literally anything you built was novel, right? And it's kind of like where robotics kind of is right now. You can build a lot of things and like anything you build is kind of novel and people are interested like, oh, that looks really cool.
Marcus, our virtual audience can't see because the camera's pointed right there in front of you.
Ah, okay, cool. Right here? Yeah.
Now you're back.
All right, I see it now. This is my little walkway. All right, cool. All right, so we could kind of start about my PhD research because it kind of ties into the story. My first job out of undergrad was as a research scientist working at a company called Night Vision, which is now Army Research Labs. And at that job, I worked there for around like 2.5 years. At that job, I was working on image recognition and image tracking and target tracking in low-wave infrared on like Humvees and all kinds of like military vehicles, right? And it's actually kind of interesting how I got that job. Like I didn't interview or anything. Like I happened to like be at the gym, and the director of the lab brought his daughter there every day, right? And me and him just casually struck up a conversation talking about basketball. And during that, I was like, yeah, I switched my undergrad. Here I am, like just, I'm generally interviewing at a few places around here. He's like, oh, you should come by my lab. I was like, you have a lab? He's like, yeah, I have a lab. And I came in, we had a conversation, was kind of really informal, and boom, got a job as a research scientist there, which sounds weird, but happens a lot more than you'd kind of think. Being at the right place at the right time is kind of one of those traits. You can make your own luck in that kind of way, right? But yeah, this was like the really ancient like eras of like machine learning where like image recognition and in all different modalities was like really novel, right? And I keep saying novel because like there are people saying like, oh, can you take this GitHub package and make it work for me, right? And in the same way, you can find tiny problems yourself to take things that are open source or may seem like really not complex to you and apply those in like all types of industry problems that are novel to other people and get paid for it. Yeah, so after Night Vision, I was like, okay, I want to hop back into like actual research. I don't want to be doing other people's like grunt work research. I want to be leading my own research. So like, okay, if I want to do that, how do I do that? Gotta get a PhD, right? So I was doing my master's at first. And then I was like, I think I'm gonna quit my job and go into a PhD program. Totally greatest financial decision ever. Not really, right? So go from making probably like $120,000 a year to like a PhD stipend, which is like 30, right? So I was like, okay, this is great. But what if instead of just doing my PhD, I also do a bunch of residencies, right? So that sounds like the easy way to go from like 30 back to like 120, and I'd only have to work like 3 months out of the year. Great. So here's my PhD research. It is on adversarial machine learning. I had Fun Friday, and just basically tricking machine learning models, right? I did that in text, I did that in video, I did that in language, recommendation, etc. Just showing like, hey, you can make this attack possible. Really simple research to me, but to people who were like my peers who were like accepting this work, like, oh, this is novel. And like, that's kind of what a PhD is. It's like just finding kind of the edge of knowledge and like taking a step further and like, okay, this is my contribution here. And that's kind of it, right? So met a bunch of different companies through my university. And most of them start off with this simple like conversation. People come on campus all the time. I know at Michigan, there's tons of companies come on campus all the time, want to come in, have conversations with you guys, just like generally let's like shoot the stuff. Like, okay, here's what we do and blah, blah, blah. You have like general, like normal conversations. You could get like really cool opportunities. And that's kind of how I started my career in industry outside of like the DoD. So my first residency was at Netflix. And I actually met the director of the data science, I guess, org at Netflix at my university back in like 2019, right? And I like helped them like kickstart a pilot of like mentor-mentee relationships between like HBCUs and industry. Me being a test dummy, of course, because why not, right? So as part of me being a test dummy, they're like, hey, you did really good work. We'd love for you to come by and do residency this summer. And sure, why not? Like, it's my first residency. I was going to move out to California to LA. Then like 2020 hit, and I'm not moving out to LA. I'm going to be, in my basement doing a residency. Okay, cool. It's the first like set of like remote like residencies across industry ever. So really weird. No one kind of knew how this was supposed to work. But like, again, that kind of like thriving in like ambiguity and like being okay, comfortable with being lost in a way, because like kind of everyone's lost. It's kind of what being an adult is, not knowing really what you're doing. So while on Netflix, I was working on the entity resolution pipeline. So they have this graph of like billions of entities, whether those are like movies or actors or IP or those kinds of things, in which they're trying to connect them together, saying like, are these two related? Are they the same thing? So they had this problem where they're rebuilding their graph every day from scratch because they couldn't tell entities from like different sources like IMDb or MongoDB, or if you watch like a lot of Bollywood films, there's like a lot of Bollywood sources or a lot of Korean sources, et cetera, talking about the same stuff. So worked on that all summer, got it shipped, and did such a great job that they're like, hey, you know what? You can mess up our systems next year too, right? So got another invite to come back the next summer. It's like, okay, sure, cool. In the meantime, I was like, I want to like search some other problems, right? So I actually left this off, but my next residency was at Apple. So after the summer of 2020, like in the fall, I worked at Apple, working on 3D action recognition for, I guess, your iPhone, your iPad, right? One of those projects that never saw the light of day because WWDC just was so far away and the company just shifted completely away from it. So worked on something for about 3 months, never got used by anyone, but I learned a lot of cool things about like 3D positioning and stuff, which I used in like later problems and got a cool research paper out of it. So went for my PhD, right? From there, I went back to Netflix the next summer and worked on like a ranking problem. And after that, got another residency over at Facebook or Meta, working on Reels recommendation on another ranking problem, which is here is where I kind of like learned about attention, right? And along like each of these residencies, I tried to pick up like really one thing that they're doing and like, okay, let me become like a mini expert about this. Like, let me be able to talk to someone about this one concept really, really well, even if I don't care anything about like ranking, right? Or something like that. So that's kind of how I approached all these problems. And it was really interesting because like my Apple residency, I was working on action recognition. And then my Meta residency, I was working on ranking and specifically using actions to recommend or boost rankings of videos, which kind of led to my next position at X, right? Where I met Elliot. So at X, I was working on a project called Highlands, which was an exoskeleton project. Some of you guys may know it, or may have used some of the exoskeleton or seen the exoskeletons walking around. There's collaboration with Michigan and Georgia Tech, in which we got to meet a lot of really cool researchers, some members of your former lab, some graduate students, and like just a bunch of really smart people at Google Brain and Google X, right? Now the interesting part was like, what did I know about exoskeletons? Absolutely nothing. So I came into this residency, well, this full-time job actually, and I was wondering like, why do they even kind of want me to work here on this project specifically? But it was because I made a really cool paper while I was working at Meta about action recognition and boosting rankings, right? And I had someone on the team that actually reached out to me, Alvis, one of my manager in the future, reached out to me like, hey, this is cool. We're working on this. Like, is this something that you'd like to like integrate or keep working on? That sounds cool. Why not? I'd love to keep working on this, right? So that's kind of how that like ended up, right? So worked there for around a year and a half, and then boom, like every company started laying off, and like the entire every robotics project at X kind of got like crushed.
This
right?
spring.
This spring.
Yeah.
This spring that happened, right? Which I was like, that's a bummer. But in the back of my mind, and usually like when you're working on researchy kind of projects, you know you're working on a limited timeline, right? Like none of these projects are gonna last forever. Funding doesn't last forever. And either you get to like the point where you have like some like product market fit and you have a product out that people are buying, or like your project gets canned, you go to another project and everyone else goes to another project. And that's what happened, right? During that, I got to work on a bunch of like generative modeling, and got to use like a bunch of like TPUs, which are like really beefy like compute resources, GPUs, to build like language models, right? And that's actually what I was working on for the exoskeleton before the project got killed, was like a text to motion language model, so a generative model, right? And from that, I was like, there's like a bunch of things that like are really applicable to this. This is like right after like ChatGPT comes out, right? So like everyone's trying to build some like generative language model, which great. Led to my next position, right? From there, like I was able to kind of like pivot. Like the week after my entire team got laid off, I got another position at the DoD, specifically working on like encryption for language models. And I don't know anything about encryption. Why am I getting a job in encryption? It didn't matter because I knew like a lot about like edge computing and computing like specifically for language models, right? So if you take anything away from that, it's like, does it really matter if you know exactly what this new position is, or do you bring something like unique to this new project that they need, right? And then from working like with DoD, like I learned like a bunch of things before and after, right? One, there's like tons of money in funding for like students, for thriving young entrepreneurs, et cetera, in terms of like exploring like government funding, right? Which you probably didn't think there was gonna be a slide about government funding on the slide deck at all. I didn't either, and I was like, I should probably add this, right? In doing that, like you can both collab with professors like Elliot, or you could go off and spin out into your own like venture company and raise money. They do a lot of like SIVers and STRs, or SIVer, Small Business Innovation Research, STR, Small Business Technology Transfer, in which the government will pay you to build something, a prototype, keep it, and then you get to keep working on it and spin off into your own commercial application. Tons of stuff started like this, like the internet, lasers, laser discs, Tang, like a bunch of stuff that we use today is the former result of government research. Actually, if you guys are on scholarship, some of your scholarships are directly funded by government research and stuff like this, right? So here's like general phases which you can go through. I'm bringing this up because me and my friend back there, my co-founder, actually have a contracting company in which we do these all day, right? So that's pretty fun, right? Also happen to do some nonprofits with my friends. just like some like really interesting like, okay, throw entrepreneurship challenges for like high schoolers, right? Like we have like a bunch of high schoolers that come out from, I want to say 8 high schools across the country and do an entrepreneurship challenge every year. And the winners get to go to St. Croix or St. Thomas, right? Which, who wouldn't want to go to St. Thomas, St. Croix? This year, the winner was a hot sauce company, which was building a like hot sauce out of like compost vegetables in their school's like courtyard, which sounds crazy, but they were on Ellen. So yeah, they came out, we gave them like $500 each and let them enjoy St. Croix. Wrote it off, of course, as a tax deduction. Thank you, Sam. But in general, just like a really like interesting way to like give back, talk to like really young people. Here I'm talking to you guys because I consider you guys really young. And they consider me extremely old. And I'm like 28. I was like, oh man, like I was telling Elliot earlier, I haven't been in many rooms lately where I'm like the oldest person in the room, right? And that's gonna happen to all of you one day as well, right? You're gonna be sitting in some room talking to some like college kids and they're gonna be looking at you like, what is this old guy even talking about, right? And I hope that when they give you that look and you're looking back at them, you're like, full circle, right? Like, it's it. But that's the end of my slide deck. But I would like to open the floor up for questions and secondly, talk about like some really interesting opportunities you guys could do right now in robotics with your current like degrees and skills, not only in like the DC area, but like in the Michigan area. There's a bunch of startups that are one, raising, but two, have like huge like industrial labs, kind of like how Stanford used to have what used to be Silicon Valley, also happening out here. But yeah, does anyone have any questions first?
Maybe like a quick question, just kind of like start it off.
Sure.
So you've had like, very different experiences, like a really broad set of experiences for your kind of place in your career.
Yeah.
So what I'm kind of wondering is like, what were those, a day in the life like? That might be difficult because of COVID, but like, could you just talk a little bit about like, what are your days like, and like, how have they changed kind of across these different opportunities?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think when I came into like my first couple of jobs, like when I was going into the office every day, sitting in a cubicle, like the room was dark because all software engineers just love like dark black rooms, like get to decorate your own cubby, that kind of stuff. And like looking at a computer screen for probably 12 hours a day, right? Taking like a 30-minute lunch break, that kind of stuff. Sounds really monotonous, and it was like going through like 6 meetings a day and like, and then getting off work and then going to take classes for a master's degree. That was like my day-to-day, every day while I was working at Night Vision as a research scientist, right? Which is why I quit my job. Some of my residencies that were remote, it was a little different, right? Like everyone's kind of like in Slack, like chilling. It's kind of a lot of positions now, like a lot of companies are like kind of both remote and like hybrid, in which like you can be in the office every day, you can be at home, kind of really depends on what you want to do. I would suggest, since you guys are like really young in your career, it's gonna sound like, boo, old man wants like you guys go into the office, but like if you can, I'd say be hybrid, go in every once in a while. Like I've had remote positions where I still went in every once in a while just so I could like see people. And like, I don't know, you move to a new city. Like I moved from like DC to San Francisco, right? Like I've been living in DC for basically forever. And then moved cross country to San Francisco because I was like, okay, I need to change. This is where all of like the big advancements in AI are. I should go there, right? Moved to a big city. Well, I guess DC is technically a big city, but not really. It's like Detroit. You guys never been there. But going into the office every once in a while, just like kicking with your team, like especially like when you're working on something like robotics, like it's like kind of important to like be in and like test out like malfunctioning gear. Like it's all fun and games until like you're the guy who has to test out like bad code every day, and now you're like, Patrick like cut his leg last week because like the rotor was messed up. I should probably double check that before I push this next like PR or change, right? So that's kind of like how my career kind of started. Like towards now, like most of the positions that I'm offered or most of like my work, I stay at home, just chill, go into the office maybe like once a week if I want to. Really all of, like the outside I do is like going to like networking events. Like there's like in San Francisco, there's like tons of like different like hackathons and stuff that I go to just because like I like hating myself and working in a sweaty room with a bunch of smelly people for 24 hours. Get free lunch, win. You know, if you guys are fans of pizza, it gets better. Sometimes you might get sushi, sometimes it might be burrito, who knows? But like I met a bunch of like really cool people. Like last week I was at a hackathon at AGI House in San Francisco. Met Sebastian Thrun, who's the former founder of Waymo. Met Eric Schmidt, former Google CEO, one of the first Google CEOs. A bunch of people that like just go to those kinds of events because they want to also meet young people like you who are experts in their field, which even if you don't feel like you're an expert in your field, you are an expert in your field because you've been studying for what, 4 years, 6 years, 8 years on this specific, very niche problem that like if you have a conversation with people are like, dude, shut up. Like, I don't really want to talk about robotics right now. We're drinking, that kind of stuff. One thing I will say that I found out is like, especially like in AI, and kind of in robotics as well, no one wants to have a conversation about your job unless it's over a drink. I don't understand why, but I pretty much enjoy it. Like you go to like a conference or something and there'll be a bunch of like really stuffy people talking, right? About like, oh yeah, there was this paper that came out last week. Did you see it? Yeah, Google came out with this paper. DeepMind came out with this paper. And you could talk about that and it's kind of like interesting, irrelevant. See it. But what's even cooler is if you go to a bar with some of the people that you go to these conferences with and have a drink, and then the real conversation is happening. People are talking about life, how much time they actually want to spend working on robotics. And you'll be surprised that a lot of these people are more like you than you would think. They don't want to talk about this problem 24/7. They want to go home, have families, go have a balance.
So you talked about being in different points of your education, and congratulations on almost wrapping up your PhD.
Thank you.
And thinking about where you were as an undergraduate student, any specific courses that you feel like were the most crucial in helping you in industry and with your PhD? I know a lot of students struggle with EAPS 280 here, which is kind of like a very in-depth course in programming and coding. To get your opinion.
That's a good question. As far as courses go, I'd tell you that like get a good grade in your courses, of course, because you selected them, right? Like you shouldn't fail any course that you select. But in general, no one really cares, right? As far as like what courses that you do great in. As long as you get a good grade in most of your courses, you're pretty good to go. Most of your learning is probably gonna be hands-on, right? Now, whether that's like taking labs, or going online, like YouTube University, like most people are doing, or like going on Twitter, that's probably where you're gonna learn most of like your hands-on, like actual important stuff. I would say that like learning about parallelization is probably pretty important. Getting good with the GPU is probably pretty important. That kind of stuff, getting hands-on with like just low-level motors, rotors, etc., understanding the difference. That's probably pretty important. But other than that, like, just go be a tinkerer. Like, go build stuff on your free days and make YouTube videos about it. Like, everyone wants to be an influencer. You can be an influencer in like robotics. Why not? Right? Like, I know tons of AI influencers. Some of the people who like were my idols that I met like within the last like 8 months. I'm like, oh, they're regular people, and they don't know everything. They just generally do like research and make videos about it. Go figure. That could be you. You could be the next TikTok robotics person, just aim your audience like really lower than you. So like you're an undergrad, maybe aim for like middle school, like high school. That's like the range. You could pop off like that. It'd be fun. Does anyone else have any questions?
Who are some of your AI influencers?
Yeah. Siraj Raval, which he was kind of controversial because he was a major plagiarizer. Andrew Carpathy, Jeff Dean, a bunch of people that you can find on Twitter at the moment, building a bunch of like really tiny components. I would say that if you wanted to become like influential in your field, find like 3 or 4 people that you're like, okay, this guy, when he says something or when she says something, I'm gonna, follow up on reading about that. And if you follow like 3 or 4 people like that every day, not like follow 3 people, but like if you follow what they're talking about every day in general, 1, you can learn a lot. 2, you'll be on like the cutting edge of whatever your thing is or your specialization is. And then 3, you're gonna look really smart to people who don't follow them, which is more than you think, right? Like, especially in like Twitter or like, I guess the equivalent of like Reddit or Y Combinator's like post threads. These are like really tight-knit communities. Like it may seem like there's an entire world of like hundreds of thousands of people like commenting on this, but like in general, there's probably like 10, 20,000 people who are making daily comments on this field, right? And then out of that 10, 20,000, half of those are probably bots. The other half like may or may not know what they're talking about. So like you have some like peripheral advantage if you're actually like reading and like going to class, passing your finals your next week, stuff like that. Does anyone else have any questions? Sure.
Yeah, so you were talking a little bit about one good way to network is the career fairs that the university has, and yeah, we all know that. But also, like, sometimes I find that I go there and they're like, "Oh yeah, we can tell you a little bit about our company, and yeah, you can just apply online and be lumped into the same bucket that everybody else is in." Like,
Yeah.
is that really giving you an advantage when you're like networking in that way, or are you just like having them tell you some canned knowledge and then applying and then getting the resume discarded?
Yeah, good question. 2 things about that. Not specifically creator fairs or like career fairs. Like that, they'll probably hold a career fair with like 500 companies will come in. You'll go around in a circle, handing out your resume or your LinkedIn, etc. They'll take your resume, throw it in the trash. They'll take your application. They'll go through some like AI language model to filter you out, and then they'll pick 10 people, and they'll have those 10 people interview for like 1 position. No. But like mostly like the talks, the on-campus talks that happen within your department and within other departments, I'd say those are like better shots in terms of like networking and like meeting people. And secondly, I'd say if you can, go out to the city. There's tons of like events with your field specifically. I know robotics, it sounds crazy. This is Detroit though, right? Go out to Detroit, go out to like some of the alumni events that come to campus. Figure out who are the alumni from your department specifically who like have positions. You can do a quick like LinkedIn search. Like, okay, these are the list of people. Like there's an art to like cold calling people as well. Not saying to get into like stalking, but like when people have like events, like, okay, maybe you show up to those public events, not like their birthday party or something, but like, there's stuff like that that you can do to like increase your odds of 1, making like a really good connection, but 2, like someone actually caring about who you are, right? You probably have like a 10-second pitch of like, hi, I'm so-and-so, I go to so-and-so, I study so-and-so, right? You gotta get those 3 sentences down generally like within like 15 seconds to like make a good impression. And sometimes it's not even about like talking about where you go or university. Maybe you just want to talk about a subject with them, like they're normal people, right? So that's the kind of things you can do to boost your chances of someone caring about who you are. 1, 2, looking at your resume, and 3, like actually wanting to push you along in the process. I'd say most of like the job applications that I sent in, like were never read. Most of the jobs I ever got, or actually all of the jobs I ever got was because like I got a recommendation from someone that's probably a better route as well. There's actually websites you can go and get a recommendation from someone in every company. I can link that to you guys if you want that. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Good question.
How did you know, or like, when did you know that you wanted to do a PhD? And like, what did you do to prepare for it?
When did I know I wanted to do a PhD? After I got my master's degree, so the way I got into grad school was kind of similar to the way I got my first job. Like I was just walking on campus at Howard. I'm from DC, so like I'm at DC, like at campus a lot of times. So walking on campus, it was one of those universities I always wanted to go to. Walking on campus, struck up a conversation with someone who would then later become my advisor about AI and what's currently like happening in the field, and like these are cool things that could be worked on. And he was like, you should come study that in my lab. Oh, you have a lab too? That's crazy, right? And it sounds cliche, but that's actually how my advisor would tell the story as well. So that's how I ended up getting my master's degree. And then like at the end of my master's degree, like I was talking to my advisor, like, yeah, thanks. I think I'm gonna go back, doing research again. He's like, what if you don't and you enter the PhD program? I was like, sounds like a lot of years of my life where like I'm in a PhD program. He's like, yes, but you'll get paid throughout it, right? So, and he allowed me to like get a bunch of jobs during that. So like every job that like I've worked, I did during like my master's and my PhD. So it's kind of like a fine balance of like having the conversation that you want. Like, hey, I want to do this job, but like, hey, I also want to do my PhD or something like that. Every advisor's not down for it. Some are, some aren't. So it's kind of like a fine line. But that's kind of how I decided to get into my PhD. I was like, I like doing this research. I want to keep going. There's funding for me. I can get this done whether in like 3 years. Sure, why not?
How many years did it like take you to do your PhD while also like doing all that work and stuff?
Good question. So I started the PhD program in 2020. So I graduated undergrad in 2018, got my master's in 2020. It took me 2 years, my master's. And I'm almost at the end, like Friday will be the end of my PhD. So another 3 years. So relatively great timing, because I know people have been in their PhD for 5, 6 years, right? I'd say the most important thing is understanding the incentives between you and your advisor, right? Because like your advisor kind of determines like when do you graduate, when you release a paper, can you go to work, can you get paid this semester? Like there's tons of things that your advisor kind of like rules in your life, especially if you're like a foreign student. It's like a even worse dichotomy of power balance here. But like your advisor is incentivized by putting out research, great research, right? So your advisor is graded by how much research papers, one, they put out, two, how many PhD students they graduate, and then three, how many students are matriculating each year. So like, are they going to the next parts of their PhD? Are they becoming candidates, et cetera? So those are the things your advisor is graded on, while you're judged by how good are your papers, how impactful are they, and then like, are you doing anything outside of your PhD to become recognizable for the university? So those are like the kind of like dual incentives. Like on your end, like you're incentivized to work as much as you want, while your advisor is incentivized to tell you only work on my things. So like it's kind of like one hand shakes the other. As long as you make sure you take care of your advisor first, your advisor is probably not going to care what you do. Now, if you're slacking off on like publishing papers and doing those kinds of things, then your advisor's probably not going to be that happy with like you doing anything outside of this, which I'm funding and I'm paying for you to do, but he or she's not actually paying for you to do their, research is paying for you, but like still, that could be someone else that's, slaving away building papers and bring in more research dollars. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Does anyone else have a question?
So you talked about being in both industry and being both in your education. Can you highlight some of those challenges or obstacles that you had in both of those? What were some of those?
Yeah, sure. Like in industry, some of my challenges were like companies have specific tech stacks, which is like super annoying to learn. Like the first thing I did at every position I got was I took a week. One, I scheduled a meeting with everyone on my team to hi, my name is, I'm gonna be working on, this is where I think that you might be able to help me. Could you tell me any places else that you could help me? So like doing that for a week generally gets you like ingratiated in the team. And then two, like learning all the tech stacks. And that may be like finding a mentor within your company. That may be like looking through the documentation that your company has, just like boring stuff like that. But it's like really important boring stuff that can set you up for, a promotion or the next position or a position on another team since you hate your team, stuff like that, right? Like those are all just like normal things at work. My biggest like hurdles in academia were probably like guidance, right? What am I doing? Like how many papers do I need to publish before I can graduate? Or like appease my advisor, things like that. How much funding will I burn through before I graduate? Not my problem because it's coming from my advisor, right? No, it is your problem because like that's kind of the calculation your advisor puts in terms of like grad school. Like, okay, I have funding for you to stay in my program for 4 years. If you're staying for 5 years, you may have to pay for this, stuff like that, right? So that's what I meant like matriculation. I think like in general, like industry problems are more tactful, like they're more technology X doesn't work in this use case. So how can I get around that? While like academia problems are more like people centric, like can I find the right mix of people to be on my committee, right? Because this professor and this professor don't like each other. So like that's gonna blow up in me, right? Like I'm gonna be the collateral damage in that. Or like, can I get like research that this professor likes and this professor likes so I can collaborate with one of their students or something like that. So those are the kinds of like hurdles that I saw. But like every university is different. It might be different at Michigan. Like I have friends that go to a bunch of different universities in terms of like doing their PhD. There's also a bunch of like different resources for you guys if you're interested in one, working in industry or working in academia, like a bunch of other people, like Discord groups, Reddit groups, etc. Like I can also send like links of all those if you guys are interested. Like of talking to other people who are going through the same steps as you. One, so it's not lonely. Like you're not the only person like doing a bunch of job applications for internships in the summer. So like that's like a problem everyone kind of goes through. And two, so you gotta get like the tips and tricks of the trade. Anyone else? Okay, cool. We can wrap this up. Thanks everyone. Don't want to hold you guys for too long, but really appreciate you guys coming out. Make sure you guys clear out all the rest of the pizza and Sprite and water and Coke or anything. Put it in your backpacks. Tag along. But yeah, it's been really nice. Thank you.